Hello everyone, and welcome to this session dedicated to high-level topics. Custom tariffs and the impacts on the supply chain in the luxury industry. So to present myself, I'm Philippe Berland. I'm the partner in the business unit Transportation, Manufacturing, Luxury and Retail. And I'm very glad to open this session on these specific topics. I'm also with some speakers. I will introduce Alain and then Romain and Alexandre.
Thanks very much, Philippe. So I'm Alain Li. I'm a senior advisor with SIA, based in Hong Kong, and was for 17 years with Richemont in Asia Pacific, also based in Hong Kong. And currently, I also serve as a director with Rémy Cointreau and also Las Vegas Sands. So thank you very much for having me here today.
I'm Romain Hurez, senior manager at SIA in Paris, and for the past 9 years, I've been working with luxury actors, helping them facing supply chain and manufacturing challenges. I'm also very pleased to be here.
And finally, Alexandre Orhan. I'm in charge of the coordination of all our R&D activities in AI, intervening in the several clients, including logistic actors, and this is why I am here to talk about this subject.
Thanks, Alain, Romain, and Alexandre. So maybe if we can go to the agenda of this session. So we'll start with some background context. Then we will add a focus on the different levers concerning the tariff impacts on how to handle that. And then we'll also see the role of AI and data on the way to leverage this AI and data capabilities. So maybe we can start with an introduction and with the global overview. And if I would maybe let Alain to share his overview of the evolving landscape of the tariffs.
Well, thanks very much. I think this is something that is unprecedented. We were all expecting tariffs to be announced, of course, with the new Trump administration. But I think the scale and the breadth of it has surprised, I think, everyone. That being said, and of course, it's still not settled. That being said, we all have to start integrating these into our business planning, and because of the extent of these tariffs, we will have to look at short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions to try and at least protect our markets and, of course, to protect our profitability. So I think there's not one size fits all. Everybody is impacted in different ways, given their exposure to different markets, and of course, particularly the US. So I think it's very timely for us to be here today to discuss this topic and to look at what options and what tools we can all use to try and come up with scenarios that will help us to navigate this, what can actually be called a black swan event.
Thanks, Alain. And maybe just to add a couple of comments on this topic of customs tariffs. So we put on these slides on the left a chart that would say sum up the evolution of the custom tariffs. So we take the example of US over the last months for EU on Chinese imports. The red is for Chinese, and the blue is for EU. And well, it's really clear that you can see the high volatility of these custom tariffs, and it means that it's unpredictable, and it's very difficult for company to manage that. For example, if you take the tariffs concerning Chinese exports, as you can see, we have a high volatility from, I would say, 54% to 145% in just a couple of days. So it's really high volatility, and it's really a challenge for the companies, meaning to understand the impacts of the tariffs, the impacts on the operations, on the business model, but also how to identify and manage the levers to face these challenges on this unpredictability of the volatility of the custom tariffs. So if we can go now on the next slides. we will have a focus on, I would say, how the trade tariffs check the foundation of the luxury and lifestyle sectors. And I will let Romain maybe introduce this slide.
Thank you, Philippe. So to better understand the market, we have analyzed 6 product categories in terms of craftsmanship, sourcing of raw materials, and production hub. Also, the possibility of finding alternatives in the US. For the first one, we wanted to highlight how the connection between a product and its place of manufacture varies by category. So, if we start with leather goods, they are strongly tied to European craftsmanship, particularly in France and Italy, even though some materials like exotic leather can be sourced globally. We can think about alligators from Florida, for example. Of course, production could be shifted to the US, but it may harm brand perception if quality is not there. We all know that grapes grow worldwide, but wine and spirits rely on legal protection such as PDOs, Protected Designation of Origin, AOC in France. Since the US already has well-established wine and spirits brands, you can think about Bourbon or Californian wines, it is a region from the old world that will be the most at risk. For example, Bordeaux or Champagne. Finally, watches are deeply rooted in Switzerland and nearby region, Germany and France. That's why there are in fact limited opportunities to extend elsewhere while keeping the brand image intact. Now, moving on to the next 3 product categories. We can start with perfumes and cosmetics. They have a deep roots in places like Grasse in southern France, but today, branding and marketing often matter more than traditional craftsmanship. Since raw materials are sourced globally and production has already expanded to the US, even if the UAE now, this category is now fairly easy to relocate. Clothing and footwear are more mixed. Haute couture and luxury shoes are still made mainly in Europe, but ready-to-wear is produced globally. Only very detailed manual work like lace from Calicoderie is difficult to outsource, and most of US luxury brands now produce in China or Mexico, first to cut costs, but also to benefit from trade deals like USMCA. And it's now time for the last segment, accessories. They show the weakest ties to a specific geography. Expertise matter less, and these items are often viewed as complementary products. Raw materials and productions are global, and while some specialized ateliers exist, for example in Japan for glasses, most manufacturing is outsourced now. So in summary, these last 3 categories show greater flexibility, with established outsourcing and production capacity already present in or near the US. Let's move on to the strategic levers that luxury players can activate to face recent or upcoming tariffs. In total, we have identified 8 key levers. They fall into 3 categories: commercial, supply chain, regulatory, and are shown in order of how easy they are to activate. We can start with the commercial ones. First, you can adapt the pricing. Luxury brands, especially at the high end, can raise prices without losing too many customers. It will let them absorb tariff costs and protect or rebuild their margins. We will see a concrete example just after. Second, they can shift to business strategy. Tariffs can also be a chance to rethink the business by focusing on more profitable products, for example, moving up market, or even bringing more production in-house. And the third one, the idea is to optimize costs. It's essential to keep costs under control. Of course, companies should review their spending and cut off or pause low return projects to focus on resource on what really drives value. Let's talk about supply chain levers. Using bonded warehouses or freighted zones can reduce delays and duties. The key is having the right documents and real-time data to avoid any issues or customs. Then you can also reassess the supplier base. By diversifying supplier, luxury brand can shift sourcing to lower tariff country and better manage risks. And you can see there are a lot of concrete examples in the past days. You can also review the manufacturing or the assembly process. Reshoring or nearshoring production, especially for key items, can lower exposure to tariffs. Circular practices can also help reduce reliance on overseas input while limiting carbon footprint. And the last two levels are about regulations. Small changes in design or in the manufacturing, and an accurate classification can help lower tariffs by avoiding overpaying at custom. It's all about HS code. And then we can also engage with stakeholders. Working closely with government and industry groups is key to keep teams aligned and better anticipate new regulations. So to make sure these levels are clear, let's now share a concrete use case initiated by famous luxury actors. I will be as brief as possible. Some brands have decided to increase prices by 10% in the US to align with evolving tariffs. This is the most basic idea. However, this carries a risk for brand perception and may encourage the growth of the grey market in particular. There is this trend in China. Then, strengthen the luxury positioning. So other players would consider moving up market to help boost profitability, strengthen the luxury positioning, and reduce sensitivity to tariffs, especially with resilient high-end customers. But this strategy also comes with challenges: intense competition in smaller segments, weak demand in China, and the risk of brand dilution through discount after all. This will also make it difficult to clearly define the brand's new identity. We can think of Burberry. To conclude on the commercial levels, as traditional regions slow down or even decline, we have also observed that some markets like Japan or South Korea continue to show a strong momentum for luxury. There, the demand driven by demand from local young consumer, we can think of K-pop, cultural appreciation for craftsmanship, we can think about Seiko, and the influence of soft power and tourism, all of this making them strategic growth market for the short term. Well, we will now move on the action taken by luxury players to optimize their supply chain. So regional warehouses, sometimes called local distribution center, help luxury brands get closer to the customer, cut delivery delays, and improve customers' processes. This is especially useful in time of crisis, as observed during COVID. But these projects requires big investment, trained local teams, and the ability to follow local rules for tax, logistics, and customs. Some players face some difficulties in this area. So that's why some luxury actors decided to shift production to lower countries in order to reduce tariff exposure and costs. However, many of these countries, like Vietnam or India, are now also targeted by the US government. This adding to risks such as lower skilled labor, logistic issues, and brand image concerns. So that's why some companies try to manufacture directly in the US. It could, of course, reduce cost, speed up delivery by being close to the final customer, and lower tariff exposure. But it also raises concerns like lack of skilled artisan, long training needs, and risk of the brand's heritage image. I hope it's clear, and now that we have gone through the levels in details, I will hand it to Alexandre to highlight the importance of data in this context.
Thank you, Romain. So now we will try to focus on the how. So why data drives scenario analysis, and what type of data is necessary to address these problems my colleagues just developed. But also it's how it influences the scenario that we're trying to build, and how building these data sets can actually help you better simulate the future. So as I said, first, it's all about the data. Data is, as it's presented here, a prerequisite to study the scenario. The data will define the level of precision your simulation tool will have. So what process and the locations that reflects your actual operations, historical data at the SKU level for the product that is helping you better anticipate your client's demand. What critical scenario would you like to prepare yourself? It means that you need the data to anticipate the future disruptions. What are the problems that you anticipate and you want to be prepared for? But also the data to build future business scenarios. So the evolution of the demand of your customers and the tariffs, the raw materials, how it will impact your business. The whole idea is to simulate and create a digital twin of your business. So you will need to build something that is based on your data. the more precise the data sets, the more accurate the prediction. The model is only built and based on the data you feed it. So incomplete data will, of course, result in an incomplete result and recommendations. And because all the problems don't come with no solutions, AI can also help in, let's say, having your data more complete, improve your data, so cleaning, correcting it with some statistical models, but you can also really recently, thanks to GenAI models, augment your data with more data that you can create and synthesize. And of course, you can also create all the projections and forecasting models of your demand, depending on your historical and all the calendar data that we can put our hands on. So if we have a look at our methodology, it's pretty simple. First, of course, the data retrieval. So we gather all the relevant data to build the digital twin of your supply chain, because here we're talking about supply chain, but it can, of course, be projected to any type of problem we want to deal with, and we'll talk about it later. But first, if you consider the supply chain, basically your supply chain is about a network, transport modes, demand structure. What are the customers that you're trying to address? What is the business that you have, and also the structure of production? Do you have an international production, or do you source your raw materials in different locations? All this information needs to be stored and clearly exposed in your data. And of course, the tariffs per origin destination comes in handy in this case, where we're talking about tariff disruptions. Then second, it's about scenario modeling. So basically, what we want to define here are our objective, our constraints, and the levers, which as AI tech guy call our variables. But what are the action levers that you want to consider? So basically, what is the question you're trying to answer? It's your objective. If you want to minimize your costs, then you know what your objective is. It's calculating all the costs you have, all the structure, and trying to minimize it. Then what are the constraints? Then your constraints are about the scenarios you're trying to consider, but also all the parameters of your business. So it really depends on the problem, and it's really specific to the problem you're trying to assess, but basically it's defining the type of simulation you're trying to do. And then the action levers, basically it's the variables. So do you want to study the way that your supply chain can adapt to minimize your costs, or do you maybe want to see if your demand structure can adapt also, and are your customers going to change their behavior? All these things needs to be assessed in the model, so it can be really reliable. And the scenario will of course only consider the data and the hypothesis that you define in advance. The model will not answer a question that you're not asking it. And finally, the most important part, it's the data-driven decision support, because all the modeling that we're talking about, the AI models, it's about the choice of the scenario, the KPIs you're trying to highlight, what are the decisions you're trying to make, and all these specifications are on the business side. The tech guys that we have in our teams, they're trying to answer a question that the business guys are asking. So all this team needs to work in the same direction. And what we need to do is to build a decision support tool for the business. So we need to know exactly what are the KPIs that they are interested in and what drives better decisions. For example, if I can take an example for supply chain, the filling rate is really important, because then you will know how efficient your supply chain is. If we move on and try to specify ourselves into the supply chain levers that Romain just talked about before, a concrete example of the supply chain use case is what it means in terms of data and granularity. Here, we're talking about 3 types of lever: product, network, and transport modes. So depending on the precise data that you have in hand, the simulation that you can perform will be even more precise. So if you have origin destination, of course, but what type of data do you have origin destination? Is it only the amount of dollars that you're shipping? Is it the quantities? Do you have pallets, or do you have type of product SKUs, as I said? So it's really important, of course, depending on your business. If you're in the luxury sector, you will have the data depending on the SKU, because every SKU is important considering the price. But if you are in more retail business, then you more talk about larger quantities. Considering the network and supply chain, the location, the capacity, the inventory size. So of course, we're talking about the business as it is, but we're also talking about how the business needs to be to adapt. So you will want to integrate into this data some levers that you want your model to consider as alternatives in order to adapt and give you solutions that can actually be more interesting than the ones that you have already. And finally, the transport modes. Of course, it only depends if you want to consider this lever. Sometimes changing transport modes is not an option, but it could be interesting to consider the fact that you can change the mode of transport from maritime to maybe planes, and also the different type of trucks if you want to electrify your fleet in the way that you are adapting to these tariffs. The idea here, of course, is not to describe just the business, but it's also to have a clear idea. Do you want new suppliers, new transport routes, new production sites? All this new lever need concrete representation into the data. And finally, to maybe have a broader perspective on what the tariffs raise, the type of problem that we have in face. It's not just about logistics, but of course, there's a lot to talk about here. So procurement, of course, considering the type of suppliers, where you want to source yourself, and what are the costs implied, the inbound inventory optimization, the inbound logistics, the warehouse placement. But also something that we can see here is what is the vision that you have for your business. Is it the short term or long term? Are the strategic decisions you want to take to adapt, or also to project into the future? Because the tariffs that are changing right now, it's something that will have a long-term impact on the global trade. So it's something that you need to consider in the long-term vision. We also have, as Romain said, demand and forecasting pricing. You need to adapt your offer, the pricing structure, and the dynamic changes that you could input into a model that gives you strategic decisions every month, every quarter, in order to adapt your pricing strategy. And of course, all the long-term and strategic decisions you can have for your supply chain, which are warehouse placement and factory relocation. The idea here is to perform what-if simulations, modify the input, force some decisions to measure the impact, and optimize the solution that you measure numerically. Every problem is different. Every business has its specificities. So this is why it's a really important part of the problem here. It's about defining exactly what is the question we're trying to answer. In our case at SIA, we have a lot of experience in this type of digital twin simulations. So we developed OptiWise, which is our optimization toolbox. It's dedicated to optimization in supply chain, but not only. We developed a product around this toolbox, which is dedicated to retail and supply chain around retail. So basically, if I take back what I just explained, all the type of data that we introduced in OptiWise, it's about supply routes. So all the type of suppliers that you have, production sites, assembly points, customer sites. So this defines all your network. You also have product groups. So for a retailer, is it like fresh product, standard, perishable, inflammable, frozen? Does this product actually have a specific constraint in terms of transport? Are there specific trucks needed to transport these goods? And of course, the temperature control and the specific specialized storage, as I just explained. If we then talk about the demand, it's of course the demand on the specific sites, but we can also consider some regional optimization. It's pretty flexible, and the idea here is actually to give the clients that we work with on OptiWise the ability to model the type of problem that they want to address, and implement into OptiWise the specification of their supply chain, and then try to simulate with different scenarios and compare the scenarios with KPIs. This is the most important part. If you don't have the right KPIs to compare your scenarios between them, you won't be able to take the right decisions. So now that I've talked about OptiWise, I will leave the floor to Philippe, who will just present you our activity at CA.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Alexandre. So maybe a couple of words of CA. So, well, we were founded in 1999. We are born digital, and we have more than 3,000 consultants all over the world, in working across 19 countries. And talking about our capabilities in AI and data science, so we have strong capabilities in this field. We have more than 400 AI and data science experts in this field, with 12 R&D labs, very focused on specific capabilities in this area in data science, from operational research to advanced analytics and data capture and so on. And it's not only the capabilities in AI and data science. We have also strong capabilities in the different industries of our customers. So from, I would say, retail and luxury to energy, to finance, to HR topics. So with all these capabilities, we provide this strong expertise to solve customers' problems. And thank you for your attention. And thanks, Alain. Thanks, Alexandre. And thanks, Romain. I'm happy to answer to any questions. So please feel free to contact us.